Hello and welcome back. This video is a little overdue. We've had some recording issues, so we've switched software now and we're using Camtasia, and hopefully everything will work properly and I won't have to record this video for a fifth time. So where we left off was with the torso complete with good topology, and everything is looking pretty nice. And now it is time to move on to the head. Now, for the sake of this course and the amount of time that we have, which is 16 weeks to get a complete character, I won't be covering head modeling in depth, and we certainly won't be doing any sculpting as much as that is fast becoming the go-to workflow for 3D artists. We're actually going to be using a software called Skinect. So what Skinect is it can use your Xbox Kinect as a 3D scanner and then generate a mesh. You can do a free trial, and then there's a paid version that will export materials and objects. The objects are .obj or STL and texture maps. It's a pretty cool piece of software, and that's just Skinect. You search for Skinect and you'll find it online. So what we did is we scanned our heads in class, and once we had them refined, we exported the OBJ file and we imported that into Blender. So just for those of you who aren't in the class, know how we got to where we got. This is the software that we use to get a head scan of ourselves. So if I jump into Blender and go to layer 4, this is what the scan looked like. Not that, this is what the scan looked like. It's not the most detailed of scans, but it captures the shape pretty well. This is more or less what my head looks like, sans hole in the top. And so what our workflow is going to be is we're going to take this scan and we're going to retopologize it, because right now if I tab in edit mode on this, you can see, one, it's super dense, and two, it's just a whole bunch of triangles and poles and a whole lot of really bad geometry that also, you can see it's 120,000 verts. So not something that's particularly useful for us for working with directly, and that's why we're going to retopologize it. So if I unhide the mesh that I hid, this is where we're going to get to with this video. We're laying down good edge flow, good topology, and it's pretty simple, and we're not worrying about the details too much for a couple of reasons. One, because that is a lengthy subject in and of itself. Also because the scan doesn't really have the detail that we would need to retopologize directly from the scan. This isn't quite as good as a sculpt, where a lot of times with sculpts you'll see, either in Blender or ZBrush, you'll see a very detailed sculpt that you can then go in and get really exact retopology. This doesn't have this, but this will get us close with the rest of the head, and then we can go back and in a future video we will add in reference images and more specifically model the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And I will talk about attaching an existing ear. We won't be modeling the ear on camera, again, for the sake of time. So with the head, much like the torso and the hand, is we're going to start with laying out the kind of the key topology and then working on filling in the gaps. So we've got face loops around the eye. We have a loop around the nose and the mouth, a loop around just the mouth, a loop around just the nose. We have this loop that covers the jawline and then goes up over around the ear and back, and also at this pole right here splits off and covers the forehead. Just as important in the topology, just as important as the edge flow and the face flow is also where the poles are, because this is where the geometry turns. So if we look at, say, this pole right here, on this side of it, we have a face loop that travels from the bridge of the nose into the chin. But if we follow this edge right here, when it gets to the pole, it splits off. You can think of it kind of like a fork in the road. It splits off and then travels around the eyes and across the forehead. So this is how we kind of control which way our edges are going. So this is a just as important thing to focus on as the edges in the faces themselves. Okay. With that in mind, I absolutely encourage you to find topology references for this as you would for anything else. And so what I am using is once again Blender Cookie, my absolute favorite Blender website. Jonathan Williamson did an excellent video on face topology, and he lays out the loops and discusses why it's important, and it doesn't go too much into the process of creating them, which is the purpose of this video, but he talks about where to lay them out and why they're important. He talks a little bit about the importance of poles as well. So this is a primary reference. If you are a paid member of this website, you can also download the source files. You can open up this blend file in a second instance, and you can use that to work from. So this is a great resource. Another one that you see pop up on a lot of forums as far as a reference is hippiedrome.com. It's an odd name, but it's a very useful website, again, specifically for topology and setting up the mesh for animation, for good deformation. So if you go to articulating the face, that'll take you here, and you can see a couple of different views that do have the poles highlighted, so you can see the important places to put them. Now these are flattened images, so it can be a little bit confusing to follow, so this video might be more useful, but it's just another option. And then there's Google image searches and plenty of ways that you can get this information. Also, I'd like to point out that there isn't one specific right way to do this. There's a lot of commonalities, there's a lot of best practices, but there's not one definitive set in stone, this is the right way to lay out your edges. It depends on how high poly or how low poly your model is going to be. Is it going to be animated? How much detail do you have and where do you have it? So it's a little flexible, but there are, like I said, best practices. You want to outline the major forms. You want your edges to follow the flow of the muscles. And also with poles especially, you generally don't want them in a place that is going to be deforming all over the place, and it's going to be moving a whole lot once you start animating. So having a pole in the middle of the cheek that's going to stretch a lot isn't going to work too well, because as the jaw opens, it'll stretch the mesh and you'll see a little pinch. So having them in places that don't move quite as much, right here at the cheekbone won't move a whole lot. If you put your finger on your cheekbone and then move your mouth, it doesn't move a whole lot. That's a good indicator of where to place a pole. So, with that in mind, experiment as you need to. But let's get into it. So you can see that this one is already completed, so I will start a new one. So with the retopology process, what we're going to do is we're going to use surface snapping. We'll start with a plane and we'll extrude it out, and we'll extrude the key face loops. So you can see that this mesh is kind of glued to the other mesh, and that's done through face snapping. So let me show you how to set that up. I'm going to hide this mesh. Like I said, we're going to start with a plane, so I'm going to hit in object mode, go into front view. I'm going to put my 3D cursor right about the bridge of the nose. Say right about there. I'm going to hit Shift A, add mesh plane. Okay, now immediately it's enormous, so I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees around the x-axis, and then I'm going to scale it down to about 0.05. Go into front view. Okay. And I'll scale it down some more to right about there, and we'll move it right about there. A couple other things to note before I forget. This base mesh, when I brought it in, I rotated it so that it is lined up with the axis right down the center, because I want to try to keep the sides as symmetrical as possible. I realize it isn't. We will make adjustments accordingly, but I wanted to try to get it right down the center as possible. I also did scale it so that if I add in my torso, it is more or less the right size. Obviously, there's going to be more adjustments to come in the future, but just so that I can occasionally take a step back, and once you get ahead on your model, it actually starts to look kind of cool that maybe you're actually making something, and it starts to come together. So as just kind of a reference point, it's good to do that. But back to the task at hand. I've got my scan centered up. We select my plane again, and I'm going to turn on snapping. So this button down here, the magnet, that is snapping. So I'm going to turn that on. Next, I've got my snapping element. I can choose what to snap it to: increment, vertex, edge, face, or volume. I'm going to choose face. Control-Shift-Tab is the shortcut for bringing up your snapping menu. And then you have the option of closest, center, median, or active. I'm going to keep that at closest. And then I'm also going to check this button right here: project individual elements on the surface of other objects. And this is an important one, and let me show you why. So with that off right now, I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to hit G, and you can see the little circle is indicating what vertex is being snapped to the surface below it. So let's say I go right up here. Okay, it looks like it's snapped to the surface. If I rotate around the model, you can see that that vertex is snapped to the surface, and the other one is pretty close just by the nature of the geometry, but the other two are just kind of floating out in space. So I would either have to select them individually or modify them after the fact, and that is a slow and tedious methodology for working. So if we enable this button right here, project individual elements on the surface of other objects, it's going to snap each vertex individually at the same time. So now if I'm in front view and I hit G and move my mouse around, you can see that all four vertices have snapped to the mesh below it. And this is a great thing and will greatly speed up our process. Okay, so now that we have everything set up, there's one last thing I want to do, and that is just simply add a mirror modifier, turn clipping on, and now I'm ready to begin. So I'm going to move this plane right to the center of the bridge of the nose, right about there, and I'm going to select the center and just move that and make sure that it is actually snapped to the center. Then I'm going to select this edge. Actually, let's move everything down a little bit. Oops. To right about maybe there. Okay, I'll select this edge, shift select, and I'm going to extrude it out. And just keep extruding, and I want to get this one that's going to go around the bridge of the nose and then down around the mouth to right about there. Maybe a little lower than I might bring it all the way down to here, something like that. So again, that's kind of the beauty of this process, is I'm just laying out the key edge loops, and I can modify the edge loops after the fact before I fill in the rest of the mesh. So it's just E to extrude, R to rotate, G to move. I'll also note that not every way that you can move verts will actually snap to the mesh. So if I if I select a vertex and hit G and move it, it'll snap to the mesh. If I edge slide, so if I double tap G and move it around, it won't necessarily snap to the mesh. So then I'll have to, once I confirm where I want to move it to, I will hit G one more time and left click immediately, just so it'll kind of activate the snapping. Okay, so I've got, and I want to keep this as smooth as I can. I don't want any super sharp angles or anything really abrupt like that. I'm not too worried about my edge count, how many vertices I have along the path, again, because that's an easy thing to modify later on as we start filling in the rest of the mesh. But I think that, at least as a starting point, will work pretty well. I might move this one back a little bit, but I think that'll work. So that's the first loop. The next thing that I'll do is I will do one around the mouth. And for the one around the mouth, I think the way that I'll do it is I'm going to just position the cursor in the center, and then I'm going to hit Shift A, add circle. Then I'm going to immediately hit F6 to bring up my properties, and we'll turn the vertices down to, we'll go with 16 for now, a radius of 0.1, and check Align to View, and we can actually bring that radius down a little bit more. Something like that'll work, 0.02. Okay, so S and Z to kind of a little bit more approximate the shape of the mouth. I'm going to deselect and just select this side and delete it because we have the mirror modifier on, so we don't need the circle on both sides. And then I'm going to select these two end verts and move them in along the x-axis to make sure that they catch the center for snapping. Okay. Now, again, the scan that I'm basing this off of isn't super detailed, so I can't really tell where the edges of my lips are. So I'm just guessing, and later on when I bring in the reference images, I will be able to get a better idea of exactly where my mouth is. But for now, just approximating, we'll go with that. And then what I'll do is I'm going to select this edge. I'm just going to hit E to extrude, right click to keep it in the same spot, and then Alt S, or actually no, just S. Scale that out along the normals, or excuse me, just scale that out, scale it up, so I get that face loop. Now we can see we've got some dark faces going on here, and what that tells me is that the normals are inverted. So I'm going to hover over one of these verts, hit L, that'll select everything that's linked to it, and then I'm going to hit Control N to recalculate the normals. Okay, so that's 2 loops done. And if I hit number pad / to go into local view, you can see the muzzle of my face starting to come together. So let's keep on working. Next I will do a face loop around the nose. So to do that, I'm going to first move these up a little bit, and we'll move that, try to keep them more or less the same size. I'm going to select this edge right here, hit Shift D to duplicate it, and move it down a little bit. Okay, and look at it. Make sure you're looking at it from all sides, because obviously it looks like it's flat and straight from the front. As I move around it, you can see it's got a little bit more depth to it. So just be mindful that you are in fact working in 3 dimensions. I know it can be really easy to get comfortable in one view and then not ever look at it from a different angle. So I'm going to, this time I'm just going to extrude just the full edge first, then I will extrude out from there. So with this vert selected, if you hold down Control and left click, it will extrude out automatically. And this is true whether you have one vert selected or if you have an edge selected. And I think it'll do that if you have a face selected as well. Whoops, not that one. I think. Let's test it. Yes, it will do the face as well. So it's a pretty handy shortcut, especially when you're doing a lot of retopology and you got a lot of edges that you need to create can be really useful. So it's just Control left click and it will extrude out as you need. Now at this point I can see later on I'll obviously be joining these together to create a solid mesh. So I am lining the verts up kind of pretty close. It's pretty obvious that I am going to have a face loop that is going to go right down the center of the face. So this will connect here. That'll probably connect. That will probably connect. This will probably connect. So I am lining these verts up because I just know that that's going to be almost a certainty later on. So I'm just kind of making it easier on myself. Excuse me, making it easier on myself now. Select this edge loop now that I've got the circles going all the way around the nose, and actually I might move these in just a little bit. Again, that's something that you can't really see unless you rotate around your model. Okay, then I'm going to hit E to extrude and scale that up a little bit, something like that. Probably a little bit more. Sure. And then I'm going to hit G and keep it in the same spot just so that it does snap to the surface. Oops. This top vertex right here is too high, so I'm going to move that down. And then you can see again I need to recalculate my normal, so I'm going to select L and Control N. Okay. And move that over. And actually probably later I'm actually just going to merge these together, but I just want to get the main loops first before I worry about any poles that are going to come up. Okay, the next one that I will do, we'll do one around the eyes. So again, I'm just going to left click roughly where I think the eye is going to be. If I go to side view, put the 3D cursor right there, in front view, yeah, we'll say right there. Again, you can see how little detail there is in this scan. It's a lot of faces, but it's not really giving me a lot of detail. With Sconnect, by the way, it uses the Connect, but there are other 3D sensors that you can use that may give you better results. I'm not sure. I haven't really investigated it that thoroughly, but just keep that in mind if that is a direction that you want to go. So 3D cursor's right there. Shift A, add circle. It's retaining my settings from last time. I'm going to hit F6 and just check align to view. Okay. Then I'm going to hit S and Z to flatten it out and scale that down a little bit more. Something like that. And then G and yeah, we'll say, I don't know, something like that. Maybe move that down just a little bit more. Yeah, that'll work again for now. And then I'll hit E to extrude and scale it up. And maybe scale it up a little bit more along the Z-axis. And select everything and recalculate the normals. Okay. Next, let's do, if you refer to your reference, and I should say what I'm using as a reference is actually the one that I did earlier. I've got obviously everything here laid out so that I can see, but also I had all of the poles selected, which I will be referencing here in a moment. But if you select one pole, you can then go to your select menu here and select similar amount of connecting edges. And what that'll do is that'll select all of the 5-sided poles, which will be very useful here in a minute. But this is the reference that I'm using for my topology. Again, there's plenty of resources out there that you can find for reference, but I do encourage you to have some sort of reference available as you're working. Okay, so let's move on to the next loop, and I think the next one that we do, as I look at my reference, I think I'm going to, well, let's do the jaw one first. So I'm going to select this edge, and hit Shift D, move it down, then I'm going to extrude it down to about there. Okay, I'm going to select this edge, and now I want to go up the jawline, then up in front of the ear, and then I'm going to go over the ear and around to the back of the head. Okay, and I'll come all the way back. So, select this edge. I'm going to left click to about there, and then I'll left click to about there. And then you can see that it kind of goes through the mesh. So I'm going to hit Control R. I'm going to add in 2 edge loops. Left click and to confirm, and then you can see right now I'm in edge slide mode. Then I'm going to right click to keep in the same spot. You can see if I go into wireframe that they are in fact there. And then I'm going to hit G, and they will snap to the surface. Okay. So this one is going to need to rotate around a little bit. I'm going to extrude it to about here, rotate that up, go to side view. I'll extrude it up to about here, add a couple of edge loops, left click to confirm. Okay, so that's snapped to the surface. I'm going to extrude this out to about here, rotate that to about 45, extrude, rotate, move that to there, and extrude, extrude, extrude. If I hit 6 on the number pad, I can kind of orbit around, extrude, and there's the center right there. Whoops, I extruded one too many times. Extrude. Okay. Maybe add one more edge loop right there, just to make sure I don't have any doubles. Nope. Okay. So that's that face loop. The next one that I'm going to do is the one that comes from the temple over the head to the center. So I'm going to move that down. Just kind of, I want this edge kind of pointing in the direction that the face loop is going to be going. So move that and that. Select these two and extrude to about here. Maybe rotate just a little bit. Extrude, 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 and just kind of keep, oops, one too many times again. Keep going. Okay, I think that'll work. There's one last main loop that I want to lay out, and that is the one. There's 2 ways you can do this next one. One way that you can do it is you can go just around the eye sockets and kind of make like a mask. Another way that you can do it, and that's the way that's done in the reference video that I mentioned right here, this green one right here, is you can go across the forehead down and then join in with this loop right about here, and that's what I'm going to do for this one. Okay, so in preparation for that, I'm going to edge slide this loop right there, and then I'm going to just move it right about there. I'm going to move this one down a little bit and add in a loop cut right there, and kind of move that out and smooth it out. Okay. So I think I am going to, we'll go from about here, I think. Looks about right. Yeah. And I will extrude out. I'm going to scale that down just a little bit. Okay. Extrude. Extrude. So about here, I'm going to rotate. Let me move that in just a little bit. Extrude. Rotate. Extrude. You get the idea. just keep on going. Move it to about there. And I'll add one more edge loop because I know I'm going to need it anyway. Alright, so I've got my key edge loops laid out. And if I, again, hit number pad slash, you can see a head is slowly starting to emerge. Great. So the next thing that I'm going to do, and this is something I've only recently started doing as I do retopology, is one of the struggles as you go through this that you will inevitably run into is controlling where your poles are and the placement of them, and if you have one in the wrong spot, how do you adjust your mesh so that you get it to the right spot or you get it where you want it. And so to help with that, the next step after I lay out the key edge loops is to actually make the poles. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So again, I have in my other instance of Blender, which by the way on this channel I do have a short video tip of how to open a second instance of Blender in Mac. So I have all of these poles selected so I can easily see where they are and I'm not going to miss one. I'm not going to worry about filling in the nose, so I'm not going to worry about these 3 poles right here. But you can see I've got one on the bridge of the nose, I've got one in the on the top kind of corner of where the brow meets the ridge of the nose, one at the temple, one at the outside of the cheekbone, one at the inside of the cheekbone, one just behind the nose, one above the lips, one at the jaw, and then I've got this one down here on the neck, which we'll get to a little bit later. But I've got this reference, and so what I'm going to do, just to help me figure out where everything needs to be, is I'm going to just extrude out edges so that I've got them in place. So I know I need one. I'm going to have a pole right about here on the jaw. Okay, so I'm going to edge slide this loop over, and remember the edge slide won't trigger snapping, so I need to hit G and just move that into place. I'm going to slide this one over a little bit and then right there, and then I will add one more edge loop right here. Okay, and then this is the one, this is where I want to have a pole. Okay, so because we're going to have an edge that will travel here, and then we'll go up and probably meet up right there, and then I will have another edge that will go out this way. Okay, so it'll kind of split off, and then I'll have the edge that'll kind of follow. I'll have a edge like this. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If not, give me just a second and it will become clearer. So I'm going to select this vertex, I'm going to hit E to extrude, and I'm going to extrude an edge right up there, and then I'm going to extrude an edge right over here. Okay, so now I have a pole placed right there, and that's all I'm going to do with that for now. I'm not going to worry about adding any more edge loops or face loops. I just want to establish where the poles are. Okay, so the next one is the one right up here. Now, we've got most of it already figured out because we extruded out here. So we've got, if I go into edge select mode, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and we just need a 5th one. So I'm going to select it and extrude it out here to right about there. Okay, next one is we will have one right about here, and we'll extrude one back here and another one, excuse me, we'll extrude another one down here. So we'll have a face loop that will travel down this way and then down that way. So this is the fork in the road, as it were. By the way, if you hold down D on the keyboard and left click and drag, that's how I'm drawing. That's the, and then if you hold down D and right click and drag, that will erase. So if you're wondering how I'm doing that, that's how. So I've got that pole. Let's move into about here, and now we're going to have a pole here, and then we're going to have another one here. about, we'll say there. This one might get a little bit muddy on this side, and there'll certainly be some adjustments that'll have to happen to make that work, but I do know I'm going to need one there. Then we're going to have one, just a second. Okay, so the next couple of poles, I don't have the geometry in place for to actually extrude it out. So what we will have is there'll be another face loop that'll come around here, and then right here there will be another pole. Okay, so that'll be one. There'll be another one. Actually, there is going to be one right here. So we'll extrude that up and extrude this one out. And then there'll be another one. There'll be another face loop around the mouth. Okay. And then there'll be another pole that'll extrude out from about here. Okay. So once we get that geometry in place, then we will add those poles. Alright, so now that I've laid out most of my poles, I also notice that they are all 5-sided poles. They're 5 edges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't want any more than that. You'll have 3-sided poles, you'll have 5-sided poles. If you have a 6-sided pole, then you're not doing something right, generally speaking. So I've got all of my poles laid out, and that's going to help to kind of start indicate where my edge flow is going to be, and in which direction things are going to be moving. Alright, so let's start with, say, this one right here. I'm going to just make a couple of small adjustments. And actually now we can also just start filling in the mesh. Alright, so this is an obvious one that's going to be filled in. This is another pretty obvious one that's going to be filled in. And then we want an edge that's going to come and meet with this edge. So I'm going to add in a face loop. I'm going to move that and smooth it out. This one I'm going to move up a little bit, rotate. This one I'm going to move back a little bit, just kind of even things out. I might add more later, but for now this works. Okay, cool, like that. And I think I'm just going to merge these together. So I'm going to select the first, I'm going to select this one, and then there's a couple ways you can merge them. There's, if you hit W to bring up your specials menu, there's this merge option. You could also just hit Alt M, which is the direct shortcut. Alt M, merge at last, because I selected this one last, that's where I want it to end. And now I can fill this face in right here. Whoops, I accidentally did something. There we go. Fill that and fill that. Okay, great. I can now fill this in. I'm actually going to move this up just a little bit. And then I'm going to extrude this out to about here. And then fill this in. Okay, and you can see how adding this pole kind of helped guide where I wanted the geometry to go. Okay. Up next, let's see. I'm going to actually slide this over a little bit. Hit G to make sure it's snapped. That's a pretty obvious one to fill in. Fill that. Let's add in another edge loop right here. Hit G to move it down to about there. Move that one, move that one, move that one down, and fill that in. Fill that. Going to slide this up and add in an edge loop right here. Great. G. Fill that. Okay, so now we're starting to get to a point. You can see these faces are going to start getting more and more stretched, and I don't want that. I want to maintain more or less square faces. I don't want anything super oblong. So at this point, what I need to do is add in another edge loop right here. And then I'm going to hit G and make sure that's even. And then I'm going to edge slide this back a little bit. Just again, I want to keep things as even as possible. Another thing that you can do is select some verts and then hit W and smooth. And then hit G again real quick, just grab it, move it, and left click it to keep it in the same spot, just so it snaps back to the surface, because smoothing will again take the mesh away from the surface. Okay, so now that I've added this edge loop, what I'm going to do is I want to, from the front view I'll do it, I want to continue this flow around the mouth, okay, like this. And I'll fill this in. But this is also where that other pull is going to come in. So I'm going to, from here, I'm going to extrude this up, and I'm going to extrude this over. Something like that, I believe, should work. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Alright, so I'm going to have, can actually probably just merge those together. Alt-M, merge it last. Fill that. Fill that. I'm going to select these two and smooth them. Scale them in a little bit so they get a little bit closer together. And then G, and just make sure that they're on the surface. You know, if you've got an edge that you just want to make just the edge smaller, select the two verts and just scale them together. It's a pretty handy thing, I think. And there's every possibility that later on I'm going to add in another edge loop right here, but I'm not going to worry about that just yet. Just want to get the general flow down. Okay, and I can actually already see that I'm going to want to slide that back, move that back a little bit, because I want to add another edge loop in right here. Then I'm going to fill this and fill this. Great. I like that. Alright. This part might get a little tricky. We'll see what happens. The nose is always a bit of a tricky part. But we'll make it work. But I think, actually, now that I look at this, if I add in an edge loop right about here, again, every time I add in an edge loop, I'm going to smooth out the geometry around it. Especially in organic models, you want to keep it flowing as best you can. Alright. I think we'll fill that in. Kind of even that out a little bit. We'll fill, which I think if we merge those together, W, merge it last. No. I lied, I don't want to do that. This is where I'm going to add in the other edge loop. Move these up a bit. Yeah, I like that better, I think. think that's better. So I'll move that down a little bit, move that down a little bit. Look at this for a second. All right. Fill that. Fill that. There we go. That's what I was looking for. I'm gonna merge that at last. And fill that in. I can fill those. So I have this diamond quad of sorts right here. And what that's doing is it's turning. We've got this face loop around the nose, and then we have this one around the nose and the mouth. So this pole is kind of that wedge from here to here, okay? And then this is, think of this as like the wedge that's dividing it. Great. So that fills in that area. And something that I can do now is I'm going to hit C to bring up my circle select. I'm going to select, say like maybe this area for now. And maybe those as well. Okay. I'm going to hit W and smooth. You'll see how it just evens everything out. And hit G to snap that back to the surface. Okay. Great. Now if I hit number pad slash, you can see we have the front of the face more or less figured out. Cool. Let's keep on moving on. Oops. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Sometimes I get confused by local view and I forget that I did it. Alright. So let's work on up the nose. Up the bridge of the nose to the brow. This one I think is pretty obvious where it's going. Just going to extrude a few times, and actually I'm just going to merge those together. Okay, and I will do the same here. And select those two and fill that in. And then I will fill the faces down the bridge of the nose. Cool. And I think we're going to need another edge loop right there. So since I added the edge loop, I'm going to smooth out around it. Okay. Looking good, I think. And we can extrude this one down. We'll say to maybe here. Let's move that over a little bit. This over a little bit. Move that to about here. Now this is where that other pole is going to be. So if I fill this in real quick, this is going to be a pole as well. So we'll extrude once over here. Then we'll extrude once down here, and then we're going to extrude once right there. Okay, so we'll have an edge flow that goes around the eye socket like this, but we'll also have, this will kind of carry over, but we'll also have an inner one that flows down around itself, and you'll see that here in just a second. We can connect these right there, and then probably subdivide once, or not subdivide, excuse me, add an edge loop right there. And I think, yeah, we'll merge that, merge it last. Whoops. No, not that. Just fill that in. Fill that in. Fill that in. So maybe move that up right about there. Move that up. And add in another edge loop right there. Again, just to try to keep things more or less even. Let's fill that in. Move this down a little bit. I'm going to merge that there. Merge at last. Fill that in. I'll move this over to here. Fill that in. Now you can see I'm probably going to end up adding another edge loop in there somewhere because it's not quite as defined as I would like it. But for now, I think that'll work. Move that down, move that down. I don't like how kind of zigzaggy that is. So I'm going to just smooth that out a little bit. We can extrude that around. Move that up to about there. Fill that in. Fill that in. Fill that in. Now you can see we're going to need to add another edge loop here. I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to focus on getting my overall geometry right first. Okay, and so now I know that this is basically going to come around and connect right to here. So that's what I'm going to do right now. We'll extrude. I'm just going to select this, control left click, and I'm going to match up to my outside verts just to make it nice and easy. And then I can fill that in. Okay. Now select those two, and then I hit F, and it'll just fill in there real quick. Make short work of that. Great. Okay, so now I've got this edge flow that comes from the center of the brow around the eye and up. I've got this one that comes down, around, and under the nose. It merges in with this edge loop right here because of this pole. I can now fill in this area right here. So we can fill that in. Let's go up to the top and fill this in. You can see we're going to need an edge loop right here. Okay, so we added the edge loop, so we can just smooth it out. Like so. Fill that, fill that, fill that, fill that. We're going to need to do some more smoothing a little bit later, I'm thinking, too. But we can see we got 1, 2, 3 there, and 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So I'm going to add in, let's see, let's move this over a little bit. Oops. Move this over a little bit. Kind of losing the shape of my eye, but that's not that big of a deal because I'm going to change the shape later anyway. Fill that in. The only thing I'm not a huge fan of is how everything seems to be kind of slanted this way. I will want to change that. But, okay. So I'm going to move that over a little bit, move this over. smoothing things out as best I can. And in an edge loop right here. Fill that in and fill that in. Okay. Again, I'm going to circle select a large portion of this and smooth it out a few times. Cool. Alright, now if I go into local view, you can see we are ever so slowly making progress, and it's actually looking pretty good. Cool. Let's do this area next, I suppose. I'm gonna move this up a little bit. I'm gonna add in one more edge loop right there. Okay, so fill that in. Fill that in. I will extrude this out first. And then fill this in. Oops. Fill that in. Add an edge loop right there. Select that edge. I'm going to subdivide that once so I get an extra vert right there. And fill that in. Fill and fill. Okay. Move this around a little bit, you can kind of see that this is going to line up right here. Oops. And then I also want to be mindful of how many edges are going to be coming across. Okay, so if this is going to come down like this, I know this is going to be here. I'm going to need 3 edges across. Okay, so I'm going to extrude it down and line up with those. And we'll fill that in. Fill that in. Fill that in. Add an edge loop. I can fill that in and fill that in. Now, obviously that's going to need to be evened out, but we get the idea. Okay. Let's keep on going. So we can extrude that down. That's a pretty obvious one to fill in. If you're ever not sure where to go next, just keep filling in the really obvious ones, and it'll start to make everything else make a little bit more sense. I'm going to add in, rotate that a little bit. I'm going to add in one more edge loop right here. What this is going to do is it's going to create a little bit of a diamond quad right here. Because we have this face loop that turns a corner. This diamond quad, and right here is actually a 3-sided pole, will help turn that geometry up towards the top of the skull. So, got that. We've got that. Let's see. What do I want to do? I want to merge that maybe. Yeah, I think I do. I'm gonna select these two. I'm gonna merge them at the center. I'm just gonna I want to keep everything smooth. Okay. Now I've got, right here you can see I have 6 verts selected. But I think the way that I'm going to fill this, oops, let's see. Yeah, I think I'm going to merge these together as well. And then just fill that in. Okay, now, again, select a bunch. Like this whole section. And actually, maybe I'll throw this in as well. And W and smooth. And bump that out. There. Now that all looks intentional. Great. This section right here will actually be pretty simple. Just going to extrude this up, rotate. I'm just going to follow the number of verts right here. So extrude, rotate, extrude, rotate, extrude, rotate, and again, and again, and again. The last one, just move right into the center. For those of you who want to work on retopology or honing your topology skills but aren't very good at modeling or sculpting or have access to a 3D scanner, one thing that you can do is go to a site like maybe blendswap.com, download somebody else's model, and then retopologize that, and just, you know, focus on the workflow. Oops, need to add more edges here. Focus on the workflow of retopologizing and placing edges in good spots, and or even just take somebody else's model and just examine where they put their edges. Try to figure out why they did what they did, how they did it, and the next time that you model ahead, you will be that much better off. Oops. Cool. So that's the face. Now we need to slide this up. I should also note that if you have the other thing hidden, like if you have the scan hidden or whatever you're snapping to, if that's hidden, then snapping won't work. It does have to be visible. So if I move this in local view, move it right there, and then go back to local view, you can see that it is no longer snapped. So just something to be mindful of as you're working if you hide different parts of meshes or whatever. So I'm going to edge slide that up, G, right about there, and again, select a bunch, smooth it out. It's a very easy way. Oops, don't extrude. It's a very easy way to get an even looking mesh without having to manually move every vertex around. Okay, so again, there's my face. It looks fairly even. As I go through the modeling process, I'll probably end up adding one or two edge loops maybe there. I'll probably need some more here and here. I'll almost certainly be adding one or two here and here. But again, that's the beauty of good topology, is that I can add mesh density where I need it very easily. You know, if my mesh was flowing all over the place and I wasn't careful about where I put my edges, it would be a whole lot more difficult to just add a little bit of extra detail, say right here. Okay? Just so you know that there is in fact a reason for this sometimes meticulous process of placing edges. And actually I might even edge slide this down a little bit. I'm going to add this edge right now. Yeah. there. Okay, cool. I think that helps. Alright, now for the top of the head and the back of the head. These are pretty quick and pretty easy. Actually, I'm just going to select, just circle select that. And I'm just going to extrude it up once. Actually, I want to slide that up a little bit too. Fill that in. Okay, and I'm going to extrude this up. Oops. Yeah, that looks good. Fill that in. We can extrude this back. I'm going to do this from top view. I'm going to scale along the y-axis, kind of flatten them out a little bit. Extrude again. Scale along the y-axis. Flatten them out a little. Now you can see that I need to move these over a little bit. Oops. Select these. Oh, and you can see I had a little bit of an issue here with the snapping. Move that. So I'm going to turn clipping off real quick. Move it back out. Turn clipping back on in my mirror. Okay, good. Now I've got this hole in my scan mesh. To deal with that, I'm just going to go right up to the edge of it, and then later on, once I turn off my surface snapping, then I can work around that and fix that section of the mesh. So let's extrude this out to just past that hole. Check the top, and again, make sure you look at it from all sides because this is starting to get a little skewed. We don't want that. Oops. There we go. Select that, fill that in. And I think we can go extrude this one more time. And you can see that we're going to need more edges back here. Let's see, we'll extrude this up, fill that, and extrude this up. Let's see. And I think maybe, let's try this. Whoops. There we go. I can bring these down a little bit. Yeah, that'll work. Extrude that down. Flatten it, scale it along the z-axis, flatten it out. Oops. I'm selecting things that I don't want to select, so be careful of that. Fill that in. Oops, I did it again. fill, and fill. Great. And again, smooth it out. Select everything in this area. W and smooth a bunch of times. Oops. Cool. Might do that with the side of the head as well. That works. Alright, now I can select these. Just extrude them down. And need to be careful that I don't get any collisions or any clipping where I don't want it. Added an edge loop right there. Should move that up a little bit more. Now I'm adding extra edge loops. It doesn't look like I really need them right now, but I know when I get to the ear and filling that in, I'm going to need the extra vertices, and this is just an easy place to add them right now. Cool. So I've got that. I can fill that edge in, and then W subdivide and give myself that one extra vertex right there. I know I'm going to need it. All right. Going to, let's extrude that once more. Let's extrude this now. So I'm going to rotate down to about here. I'm going to extrude it all the way to about maybe there. Scale along the y-axis a little bit. Kind of flatten that out. Move that to about there. G. Let's add in an edge loop right there. Fill that in. And let's see, how do I want to do this? I think I'll extrude that to about there. Fill that in. Fill that, whoops. Fill that in and fill that in. Cool. All right. I think what I need to do now going to extrude these out and merge them at the center. There's my diamond quad. Extrude these down one last time. Fill that in. Extrude that. Fill that in. Oops. Yeah, that'll work. And then what I'll end up doing once I turn off snapping is I'll extrude it once more. And then this will be the face loop right around the neck, which you can see right here, this blue one. Okay, again, this kind of ran out of room with this particular scan, but that's what that will be. I've also think I want to make a couple of changes right here. It's kind of minor ones, but I'm not super happy with what's happening here, so I'm gonna delete that vert, fill that in, move that down. I know I want that to flow in there. I think actually, what happens if I merge those? Nah, I don't really like that either. What we got there? We have 6. I have to think about this for a second. How do I want to do this? Fill that. Fill that. Okay, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this face, add in an edge loop right there, move that over, move that over. I'm going to hit X, and I'm going to delete this edge. Then we're going to merge that together. I'm going to delete this edge loop, and then fill this in. I think that works. I'll slide that down then. Slide that down. Can slide this up. Slide this up too. Fix that a little bit. Yeah, I think that works. Move that up. Oh, these are just little tweaks here and there. See, that one hadn't snapped properly. Make sure everything else looks good. Yeah, I think everything else works. You know, I might once again circle select, smooth a couple times. Same thing here. Actually, I think I might have done that one too many times. That works. Cool. Maybe one last one down here. All right, so that is the retopology. That took longer than I had anticipated, but you know, you get to see the whole process, and being that this is a video, you can fast forward, rewind, pause, do whatever you need to do to get the information out of it that you need. So hopefully that was clear and helpful, and something that you can use as a resource in your own work. And next time we will talk about getting in some reference images and setting those up, and then detailing the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.